Welcome once again, it's Carlton Blackout's King, your friendly neighbourhood ex-spook, coming to you again with another little ditty which has to do with our leaving of the European Union. But this time, what I'm going to speak about is the Second World War, because it often comes up when I say the reasons why we shouldn't lose the European Union. I hear people say we won the war and we're giving the Germans this and that and the other and all the rest of it. And we stood alone in the Second World War so we can stand alone again. Right, nothing of what I'm going to say now is in any way denigrating the losses and the battles and the hardships carried out by those fighting for the British in the Second World War. Like, by the way, my father, who's a member of the Merchant Navy, who sailed the seas across the Atlantic. And as you know, it was one of these services that lost the most people because ships were being downed by German U-boats all the time. So I'm not denigrating anybody's losses in any way, shape or means. But what I'm going to do is put in context what people are saying. So, when people say that we stood alone, i.e. Britain stood alone in 1939, it's total and utter bunkum. In 1939, Britain controlled 30% of the world's landmass. That is, 30% of the whole world was controlled by Britain. And, by the way, 25% of the world's whole population. So a quarter of the world's whole population were British, i.e. they were British colonial subjects or from Great Britain. Right. All of these people, when Neville Chamberlain said, as a result of what hasn't happened, we're now at war with Germany, all of those people were at war that same minute, day, second. Okay, understand that. So all of them, like my old man, were then thinking, what can I do for the war effort to help the mother country? Now we're going to come to something else, which I think is quite important. I think we need to understand losses of the Second World War and defeat and victory. So, example, during the Second World War, the Soviet Union lost between 25 million citizens and 40 million citizens. The United Kingdom, by the way, lost round about 600,000. Okay, and within that 600,000 losses for the United Kingdom, that includes all of the smaller colonies which were not dominions. So not your Canada, not your Australia, not your India, not your Malaysia or Burma Federation, which are all part of the British system, right? So those losses include people from the Caribbean, from Africa, from other parts of Asia. They are counted in the losses of the United Kingdom losses. Now, if you want to look at Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, put all them together and the losses of those people make up the losses that happened with Malaysia, the Burma Federation. Okay, but you never hear that. What you hear about is Australia, Canada, New Zealand. Yes, you hear that, and South Africa, but you never hear about, example, 100,000 losses in Burma. India itself lost 2.5 million people due to the Second World War. Yes, many of them due to starvation, because, of course, what they were producing was being sent across the water to keep Britain alive. In fact, it was said by the then general running the area that we're starving these people, surely we can give them something. Churchill negated that and said, no, this food isn't required by us in the mother country and it's all going to go there. Obviously, many servicemen who were Indians died as well, particularly in the East, fighting the Japanese for Britain. So let's get this context correct. First and foremost, we never stood alone. That's number one. Okay? Unless you're going to class all of which I do, all of those people who were imperial subjects standing with us. But if you're looking at this little island that we call Great Britain, even Great Britain and the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, that island premises never stood alone. Totally inaccurate, untrue. Secondly, if you want to look at where the war was won, I mentioned the Soviet Union to start off with because if you check German deaths in the Second World War, you will see that Germany lost between 5 million and 5.5 million of its soldiers on the Eastern Front and only about 1 million on the Western Front. So that's the difference. So if you ask me, and anybody who looks at this with any perspective, one has to say that the German armies were bled out in the East, not in the West. Okay? And that battle with the East was going from 1941 through till 1944 before we even landed on the European mainland, unless you're going to talk about coming up from the south to Italy in 1943 and the torch landings. But the bottom line is the deaths of Germans fighting to keep Germany the number one body within Europe were bled out on the east, not in the west, at a level of at least 5.5 to 1. Okay, so that's the reality of it. So now we need to look at this from a Brexit perspective. So what it says to me is Brexit should never be mentioned in context of the war, unless, of course, we're talking about keeping the peace in Europe, which, by the way, the European Union has been able to do for over 75 years. Okay, that's me. If you want to subscribe, please press below, and I'll come back with another little ditty in time to come. All the best. Bye-bye.